Practice.
Hey, boys and girls. Welcome to Season 2 of In Practice. If you weren't aware that we were doing these by seasons and that Season 1 was ending, I wasn't either. But I have a big list of excuses about why I was too busy to keep to this release schedule. But anyway, here I'm back. I'm trying out a couple of different ways of managing this podcast and what kind of release schedule. And this idea for seasons, I think this is going to be more successful than a hard every 2 weeks. I can muster up the energy to get a couple of episodes together on that kind of basis for a few months at a time. But for the rest of my life or for the foreseeable future, that might be a little bit much. Part of what I've been busy with is finishing up yoga teacher training, which right now, today is June 6th. So I'm in the last 3 or 4 weeks of this program. Also, and I'm pretty excited about this, I've been writing a lot more music, some instrumental, some with lyrics. But in the spirit of shameless self-promotion, if you want to hear a small sample of what I've been working on, I'll put a clip at the end of this episode after the interview. Our guest today is Nancy Geronian. Nancy is an independent life coach helping her clients through her company Find You Life Coaching in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as well as a consultant for IBM, as well as a coffee blogger. We had a chance a while back to sit down on a Skype call. Nancy has a lot of very cool insights, a lot of very cool experiences. She was really fun to talk to. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Nancy Geronian. So Victor hit me out of nowhere and he said, my friend Nancy, you should interview her for your podcast.
Oh.
And I asked him like what you do and you're a life coach. And one, I'm really interested in the coaching side of things because the whole show is about practice and how does somebody work on something? How do you improve in an area of your life? And life coach always seemed super broad to me. And no offense, it seemed a little bit like, so somebody's really good at life and tells me how to live.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, I couldn't really get my head around it. But I was hoping you describe what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we talked about this a little bit when I spoke to you last, but in regards to life coaching that I do in particularly, it's not a specific genre. It's not a specific niche. But what I do is I make sure that when people work with me, they don't want to work with me where they're reliant on me on a forever basis. So that's what I see life coaching. I see therapy, that's something that can be continual forever. But with life coaching, we want a designated time frame to work on a particular aspect that you have in your life, whether it's getting a new job, your current relationship, or any of that kind of. So that's what I think. Life coaching, certain amount of time, work on particular things and make sure it's extremely action oriented.
Okay. So do the insights come from you about their life, or do you sort of lead them through a process that makes them ask questions, client of yours?
Yeah, so that's actually, so one of the most recent clients I've had, they're like, oh, you seem like you have your things together, you can bring a new perspective. So there's actually a balance. So because I'm also a managing consultant at IBM, so I do separate, very strategy, agile kind of training and things like that. I have to make sure that if I incorporate any insight into a session, that I make sure I ask the client first and say, make sure they can kind of get to whatever they need to on their own. But if it's a specialty in terms of a field, whether it's IT related, project management, recruitment wise, I will first ask the client and say, hey, I've experienced this in a couple different areas within my career. Would you mind if I offered a little bit of insight here on this topic? So that's the only appropriate way to bring in your outside knowledge into a life coaching session.
Okay. How often does that happen for you? Because coming in and being told how to live, it definitely doesn't seem like that now that I've been researching it and from the way that you describe it to me. But what kind of exercises would you do with somebody to help them
realize what needs to be worked on, what needs to be actionable.
Yeah, definitely. So number one, yeah, we definitely don't want to be telling the client. And when I say we, I mean we as in life coaches. We do not want to be telling the client what to do. But one of my favorite exercises to do is a values assessment. So it's a very straightforward practice where I give them this worksheet, and this is before we get started with our first hour session. And what it is different kind of life things, whether it's like family value, honesty, having money. So it just goes down a list. There's about, I would say, 20 to 30 different values. And then there's one column that says like, okay, how are you currently exhibiting that value? And then how much do you value that overall, like in your life, or would you want to see that? And you just rate it 1 to 5. And it's a great way to take a look with the client and see what do you have big discrepancies on. So what is it something that you value as a 5, but currently when you're living and breathing, you see it as only kind of showing up in your life as a 1. And that's how I guide my first conversation with a client, because values, that's where you need to start in terms of the roots of why are you doing what you are doing.
Yeah, there's that old expression of happiness is thinking, saying, and doing all the same things when those are all in alignment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, as I would say, are you walking the talk is the way I say it to the clients.
Yeah, random, but I've been doing a journal assignment for yoga teacher training that was all about non-lying.
Oh.
And I thought I was a really honest person. Like I don't lie to people, but there's all sorts of degrees of lies. Mm-hmm. Leaving out specifics or leaving out obscuring truths, things like that. And it's a way that I could do it to myself too.
Absolutely. And that's interesting you bring that up, because I think authenticity is a huge part of life coaching. And actually, personally, I actually have a life coach that I meet with on a weekly basis, since I want to make sure that if I'm performing life coaching, I want to see how it is when people perform it on me as well. And throughout that,
who coaches the life coach?
Yeah, so it's like a random person who's like totally not in my life at all, which is great because it's a complete outside perspective. So she actually lives like way up north, and she's like, she knows about my life, but she doesn't know the people in my life personally, which I really prefer in terms of my life coach.
Got it. So who are your clients mostly?
I would say they're all over, but many of my clients do have a sense of either getting a new job or something in like the corporate area, since I am more specialized in that. So for example, I have a lot of people who either are on disability and are questioning whether to get a full-time job, or people who are just dissatisfied in their current job and trying to figure out where next to go. But many times it's also corporate people who have struggling relationships personally, mostly with like their partner, whether that means that it's like boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, husband, wife. But it comes in all different waves, but it centralizes usually on someone with like a business or a corporate kind of background.
I gotcha. So a lot of the times it kind of centers on change or imbalance.
I would say they come in with needing or wanting change, but then they realize where their imbalances are.
Yeah.
So they understand where the shifts need to occur in order to see the change happen and then to feel balanced. Because we want them, because even myself, there's times when I go through balances and feeling completely off center. But it's a continual process of working to make sure I'm balanced and feeling like I'm on the track that I want to be.
That's very cool. So how long have you been doing the life coaching in your own life? As long as you've been doing it as a service?
So I would say about a couple of years, 2 years now, 2.5.
So do you walk the talk?
Yeah.
It's like, is your life really awesome? Like, what are you selling? But how's that been over the course of 2 years?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely ups and downs. I mean, some affected by either personal relationships or by corporate, since I work for a large corporate firm. So there's times when things are tough. For example, I was traveling cross country for 1.5 years. That is not easy by any means. But at the same time, throughout that, I figured out what I need to do to feel balanced and feel really happy. Number one for me is working out. For instance, I have an obsession and love for hot yoga. So I would go to hot yoga a couple times a week. And then another big part was noticing when I am not focused on like my friendships and when work comes too much into my agenda, then I realize I'm severely off balance. So it's a continual process where I'm evaluating how much time am I spending on work, on personal goals, on other creative goals, and then I make sure that I'm actioning it. Because of course I go through cycles where I'm like not feeling so great, but then I feel good, and that's completely normal. So many times for my client, I'm also normalizing the fact that things aren't going to be great 100% of the time, and they won't be crappy 100% of the time. We want to work on making sure you're still grateful for what's occurring.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make you just a 100% of the time happy person. Any sort of system of self-improvement or living, that actually would just kind of be a condition. But
yes.
Dealing with negative experiences and staying grounded, that's absolutely a very valuable thing.
Yes, agreed. And I think it's also noticing what kinds of habits come into the picture when you are off balance. And so that's like a big part for me and my clients. And I'm like, okay, what are you starting to do now that you know it shows that you are off balance and things aren't going right? Whether it's you usually, light your candles and read a book for a couple hours, or it's like, you do something regularly and then it stops. You have to question what's going on, what's taking up that time now, mentally or actually taking up your time.
Gotcha. So is analyzing routine a big part of, I guess, the analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I like whenever I'm working with my client and us understand where is their time going. I know, for example, when I went to Carnegie Mellon years back, we actually, as an academic counselor there, I would literally put a schedule in front of them and tell them to time block it for me and tell them what did you actually do last week? And many people are actually shocked where their time goes. So it's like a nice little exercise I continue to do as a life coach, not only an academic counselor in college, to see, okay, where's your time going and where would you like to see it actually being spent?
Got it. Yeah. How did you come into life coaching? Because you'd been a consultant for a while beforehand.
Yes.
Yeah. So did somebody push you to do it, or did you sort of recognize it as like your calling?
I would say that I have been told by my mentorship and recruitment activities at work, they're like, you really seem to enjoy this. Not only just like working with people, but having that empathy and the ability to listen intuitively I've been told is a plus. And so about a couple years into, not even, I would say about a year and a half into IBM, when I was doing those recruitment activities, I was like, okay, I want to do something else. I can't just do my full-time job. I'm one of those people. I always need like 5 things on my plate. And
I'm with you.
So I ended up just looking around. I was like, what's a good life coaching program? And I also did want to start my own business of some sort. I don't know. I just come from a lineage of people who are like, oh, let me start a business. I was like, I just want to start a business.
That's like the heftiest side hustle a person could come up with.
Yeah. And so then, so I just decided, I was like, I'm going to do life coaching. And since then, I've been doing mostly life coaching, a lot of like writing for it and hopefully publishing shortly. And so I think that's kind of how it all came into place.
Nice. But as far as writing, you do the Nancy Brew blog along with that. So how did that idea come about?
So with that, I actually, after I stopped traveling to Seattle for one assignment for my employer, I realized I was like, okay, I don't really enjoy working from home and I don't really enjoy kind of just going into an office. I was like, I really like just going to coffee shops and working there at least a couple hours every day because I like to do a lot of writing, some trainings, things like that. And so my boyfriend, who's like, oh, you're like Nancy Cappuccino. You're always drinking your cappuccinos. You need need to like review them. I'm like, you're right. Yes. And then my other friend came to town. She's actually a model from LA, and she was my model since I debuted one of my designs on her this year at a fashion show.
Wow,
And
you do a lot of things.
yeah, that was like a random thing that I really wanted to do all the time. But my friend Kamari, she actually, when she came into town in March of this year, she's like, oh, you're like Nancy Brew. So she's the one who came up with the name. And then since then, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm starting this blog. And I did. And I do it almost every single day, and then minus a couple weekends. And yeah, I'm posting all the time.
That's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I enjoy it.
And especially having sort of that outside pressure of, I need a blog post today, so I need to go to another coffee shop.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
one, that
smart.
caffeinates you.
Mhm.
Two,
Yeah.
that gets you out of the house and into a place where you would work.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I think it's not only just like going out, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, but it's crazy because I never explored Pittsburgh. It's almost funny. It's like when you live in a city, you don't do like the exploring, seeing other places. You stick to like one coffee shop. So this Nancy Brew has really opened my eyes to like what all is even out there in Pittsburgh. So I've been really enjoying it.
That is awesome. Okay, so where should I go for coffee stops in Pittsburgh for the next time that I visit?
I would say absolutely the Strip. So you could just walk around the Strip and go to, for example, La Prima. Amazing, has been around there for a long time. And then also a new place, it's called Defer, so it's Defer. They have like food and stuff like that too, and it is amazing because they're always coming out with new things. Like for instance, they have cocktails as well, so they're like, oh, here are our new debut summer cocktails. So that one's another place. I would recommend start off going to Strip and then possibly maybe exploring out into the Lawrenceville area. Since I just this week Constellation Cafe, and it's just like a really great place to actually buckle down and work because everyone there is like on their laptops intensely working. So that's another great place too.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, I have some friends who live in Lawrenceville now. They just opened, actually, it's my friend Shem and Kyle, so I should shout out. They just opened the Macaron Bar in Pittsburgh in East Liberty.
Okay.
Yeah. And really well-designed area and like awesome coffee. They partnered with some company from Lancaster.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. You said they opened one location in East Liberty?
Yeah. But I was just thinking, like, I'm going to have so many opportunities to hang out in Lawrenceville more than I should.
Mhm.
And Constellation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Constellation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I am an expert in wasting time, and wasting time with coffee is one of my favorite things.
Perfect. I enjoy coffee as well.
Right on. You went to school for statistics,
Yes, I did.
and now your job is entirely what people in the biz call soft skills.
I would not say that. So because I'm a managing consultant. When I say strategy, I would say anything, for instance, my company we're doing to go into a client, we're doing implementations of some software, some system, some new tools. So it's always IT related. So many times I go in and I am working hands-on with the developers. And sometimes I am even doing analytical things of data sets, of creating tools that are kind of needed that aren't kind of built into the system that we just need on the side to create for some reporting. So it is definitely a lot of soft skills, but it is also like analytical financial analysis as well and things like that.
Okay. How do you create metrics at all in life coaching in order to make that more of a sort of outline where categories of their life might need work?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So I didn't create it myself, but with the training I did, so it's called IPEC, there is a leadership index analysis that you can do. It's energy leadership. It's all about where are you placing energy in different areas of your life. And then also when are you in your calm point, what kind of energy are you exuding? So I am actually certified in that assessment. So that's the assessment I would use with a client. It's just a little bit additional charge, but I always highly recommend to use that with each of my clients.
They would answer things on that 1 to 5 scale and working off of that would sort of give you a more statistical basis of what's deficient, what is fine.
Yeah. So with the values assessment, that's one of them. That's on the scale of 1 to 5. The energy leadership index, it's a kind of like a whole long big assessment. So it's a little bit more than just like rating 1 through 5. But it only takes, I think, about a couple of hours. So it's not too bad. And then I would analyze that with the client, the results.
Wow. So several hours. Have you done it?
Yes, I did. I did it a couple years ago. So I'd actually be curious if my energy levels have shifted.
You've put all that work in over 2 years. I'm sure they have.
Yeah, I hope. That would be nice.
Yeah. So drinking coffee, writing, coaching lives,
yes,
and consulting. So what are the other 5 things that you're working on?
So I think those are my key ones, but I think definitely the publications I'm working on, since I'm working on 2 books with 2 different life coaches that I've come across.
Wow.
And one of them, it's a life coaching workbook for teenagers. It's called Energy Tales. And it's a really quirky kind of book, but I adore it because it's all about explaining life coaching principles through vegetables and fruits. And our vegetables and fruits actually are characters. It's like a graphic novel almost. They're like little cartoons throughout the whole. There's a storyline around all of them. So it's really cute. Actually,
what vegetable do you find the most relatable? I should ask.
Say that again?
What vegetable do you find the most relatable?
I would say there's an adorable little young, his name is Pale Kale. So it's like a little kale and it's like a little baby. And he just kind of gets picked on and he doesn't know like when to be vocal. And I saw like in my past, I feel like I've come out of being shy, where if you tell some people in my life now that I used to be shy, they're like, no, you weren't. So I think I really relate with the Pale Kale character because, they get pale with fright. And I used to be afraid to kind of speak up. And so I think college really helped me kind of open up and be myself more. And that's why I relate the most with that character.
Yeah. Well, with your experience, I could absolutely relate. And actually, I was a little nervous about this interview because the way that I coped with my shyness was instead of sharing a lot, I've found ways to encourage people to share more. And I would listen a lot. And then I was like, okay, so if 2 very good listeners walk into the room, but say anything.
That is funny. That wouldn't be good substance. You need someone who has a little chatterbox.
Yeah. I'm doing my best. I hope that was toppling along okay.
Yes, you're doing great.
Yeah, but no, coming out of your shell and finding ways to communicate, that's an ongoing struggle. And that's actually very interesting that you chose such a people-forward job. And even consulting, too. I mean, there's the technical aspect of it, but there's always the other party that you're working with. Always.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only the client, there's always so many different vendors, different people. Your own team could be huge. There's lots of people involved.
Yeah. And you have so much energy for all these things. Would you say you're an introvert or that you were just shy?
I would say I was shy, but not. So people always ask me, are you an extrovert or introvert? And I would say it's kind of both, and it varies. So in other words, I do need alone time sometimes, but I very much need people as well. So every single day, like I need to go out and meet with people for coffee, for lunch, and I just get energized because pretty much if you're an extrovert, you get energized when you're around people. And I do feel that, but I would say about a couple times a week, I need like an hour or 2, maybe 3 alone where I'm just kind of doing things, being quiet. So I would say I'm a mixture of both now.
Oh, that's pretty well balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just know as far as like having energy to put toward things and you're always with people. So it sounds like you've sort of worked those muscles to make your life happen at the speed that you're trying to live it.
Yes. And I think the biggest thing is when I am around people the whole day, I've found that, for instance, going to a workout class by myself, I've really preferred that. So like I go and like sometimes I used to go with friends and that was great, but I felt the most kind of release and kind of emotional de-stress when I would go to a hot yoga class by myself, walk there, walk back, and that felt very nice.
Yeah. Well, I had an instructor in the teacher program explain to me, it was about language, and I kept saying our or your. And he said, try to keep it general, like the waist, the arms, because yoga is the introvert's like favorite place to be. You know,
Oh,
you can be with other people, but you can still be totally on an island of yourself on your own mat. Everybody's facing the same direction, not making eye contact. Everybody's having their own experience with the practice.
oh, that's interesting to think about that. But
Yeah, it's sort of got me thinking because I started going to yoga a lot by myself,
mm-hmm.
and I guess it felt like another safe space, maybe because of that.
That could be it. That's actually very true because similar to that, I used to go to some workout classes where it was like stations, and I would go with my coworker. And I realized I enjoyed it, but it's not something I wanted to do every day because it's like you go, you're having so many conversations with people, and then blah, and they're like, "How are you?" And for some reason, I noticed that it just made me a little bit uncomfortable. So it's my little like introvert self came out. Where in yoga, they didn't do that. Like you just went to your mat. You could lay down for 10 minutes before the class started. No one would bother you like I did. And now that you're saying that, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it can absolutely be a social thing, and some people use it like that. But there are definitely some people, myself included, who are just like, I can go there and be by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So has the idea, like yogic ideas, played into the life coaching at all? Because some of what I was reading on your website seemed like finding other ways to say find your dharma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with me, because I do a lot of Bikram yoga and things like that. And so it's like they talk about it's like, okay, you're releasing the toxins from your body. You know, you're trying to breathe and centralize yourself. So many times, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's finding what are the toxins that are in your life overall. And so I visualize it almost the same way. It's like, what do you need to release, whether it's certain relationships, certain habits, etc.
Do you still feel like there are sides of your life that, even with like an active look at it and trying to measure, you can still sort of forget about?
So I think with me, one thing I'm really trying to focus on is I see myself where I go through some periods where like I'm doing really great, things are awesome, but whenever things are a little bit slower, because I mentioned to you, I need always a lot of things. I think I need to learn how to accept the calm, which is, I know, very strange concept, but to me, I think that's my biggest kind of learning curve that I'm working on right now is when things aren't kind of crazy, busy, things are going on, how do I feel okay and still proud of what I'm doing whenever things are a little bit slower?
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's funny that you put it that way, because I was looking through the testimonials on your website,
Mm-hmm.
and that idea of not just surviving life, but living it.
Mm-hmm.
That's, well, when you get a quiet space, you have to ask yourself, well, what do I want to do? And those are questions that you have to ask yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and get in touch with your inner dialogue more. Where if you're, I totally make myself busier than I have to be too.
Mm-hmm.
And once I have that, I have routine and I have structure, but it doesn't make me ask a lot of questions because my time will be taken up.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You have like more breather room sometimes when you're not fully busy. But it's when you're asking yourself those questions, are you kind of happy where kind of everything's playing out is the big thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are terrifying questions. Oh, sorry. What was the second book that you were working on?
Yeah, so the second book it's all about leadership. So like who's the new leader right now with all the different generation, with all the different kind of culture, political climate, etc. Like who's making the best leaders right now? And I'm working on that with a fellow life coach who had her own spa for decades. She works in the government now, doing a bunch of leadership opportunities for people going into the government. So she's just an all-star. And so we're working together with kind of my little bit shorter career and her larger career to kind of put it together into a nice framework.
Wow. Okay. So is it sort of a case studies of like who the leaders are right now?
So how we're doing it is we're saying that there's these 10 business competencies. And so we are actually separating our book into the 10 competencies and then going into kind of a storyline throughout the entire book that's unified and exemplifies like, okay, this is what a leader encompasses and how do they actively work on it. And also it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but different process diagrams. And so with ours, we're going to have these three stages. And so there's going to be three different competencies that are under each stage. And then the final one is like the mastery one. Okay, once you reach mastery as a leader, like what else do you need to do? So it kind of goes into a nice little story, but at the same time, it's structured for those type A people where there is a process involved and it has stages and things like that.
Yeah. Well, even just having a diagram to look at helps you visualize it and sort of think about where you are on your path.
Exactly. That's our goal is, okay, it's like, I'm a leader now. I kind of have these competencies. Where do I go from here? But we also want it to be a book that anyone can pick up at any time if they're struggling with just one of the competencies at some point.
Those are very fun books to read when you can just do that.
Exactly. Yeah. We want to use three kind of book.
More numbers. I love that a lot of these I guess self-analysis books. I don't want to call them self-help books.
Yeah.
Self-analysis and self-action.
Yeah, self-action.
They always come down to numbers.
Mm-hmm.
10 business competencies. Had you always done that? Been a list writer, maybe?
Absolutely. It's like almost like you caught me, after speaking with me for 30 minutes. I am absolutely a writer of lists.
Short amount of time.
But you definitely got it. I'm constantly writing lists and not only just like, oh, okay, here's the list of what I need to do, but I have a list of like always a grocery list on my phone, my thoughts on my phone as a list. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. Have you always been an organized person, you feel like?
Yes, I would say I always have been. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, because it goes both ways. I keep lists on my phone all the time, but I don't use them consistently enough to be organized.
Yeah.
So it's more of like I have it there to catch it to make sure it doesn't disappear. Mm-hmm. Is how I look at the lists on my phone. But what kind of lists are you keeping besides groceries?
Yeah, so I think with me, they always kind of change based on my workload. So for example, sometimes what I used to do that I realized didn't work. So I'll first tell you what didn't work for me. I remember a couple of years ago, I was working extremely hard. And so I ended up kind of putting everything on my laptop. So then I would kind of be stuck with my machine. I had my to-do list. And so I had a to-do list on kind of my notes of my Mac. I realized that did not work because I was just so ingrained in my work and my laptop that my brain gave out. It was like, it can't do this much just around work. So I ended up shifting out of that. It was just too much. I was like, I can't look at a screen for that many hours. I ended up shifting out of that and actually started using a notebook. And it's actually worked really well for me since I love handwriting things. I also...
Okay, that's really weird because I did exactly the same thing.
Really? No.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of writing or a lot of work and organizing things on my screen or my laptop. And I read, I think it was Steal Like an Artist.
Okay.
And that got me into using notebooks, and it's gotten really bad. I've even gotten to the point of thinking about getting like fancy like ink dipping pens and things like that for like the feel of the writing. But yeah, having a tactile experience with it just feels more real.
Exactly. And so I think especially in our society where we're so electronic based, I think we're forgetting the linkage of our handwriting and our brain. So that is exactly why I switched over to a notebook where I actually write out Monday, Tuesday, like each day of the week on each page, because I have like usually like almost like a dozen to 20 to-dos every day. So that's why I break it up that way. And I would write out what I need to do that day and kind of star what has to be done. And so that really worked for me because now I'm like, okay, I'm Tuesday now. This is what I did yesterday. And in terms of structure, anyone could ask me what I did the last week and I could tell you. And it was very helpful.
That's also very helpful if you're a murder suspect.
I mean, like, I was here, I was there, you know.
Just like, listen, I was doing one of these 20 things.
Well, hopefully I'm never in that position, but I do use my Outlook calendar too when I was at my client site, and I did block out my whole week also, so I knew where I was filling my time to.
Oh, okay.
Even if it wasn't meetings, yeah, I would be like, okay, I'm doing this analysis at this time, and if it didn't work, I would reschedule it and then put in what I did at that time.
Is this something that you sit down and look at to schedule every morning or every week?
I would say it was usually every Sunday or Monday morning on my flights, or right before my flights because I would fly usually to my clients. So I would usually do it, when I'm just not around anyone, kind of just in my own zone, and just take a big picture dive on it and take a look. And then that way I was able to say, oh, hey, like, email one of my coworkers and say, hey, we haven't touched on this and I know the client wants it. And I would send an email and ask them to schedule a meeting with me so we can talk about it. So it got me organized on a whole entire schedule outlook.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you said something like that, because that's like one little thing that I could practice doing. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you've, what are some of the things that you think you've been building up skill-wise since you started working consulting and life coaching?
Skill-wise, number one is just incorporating workouts into my routine, because the first 2 years when I worked for IBM, I actually didn't work out, I think, at all, maybe like once a month or something. So I was fully ingrained into work. So number one is just prioritizing things that matter to me, AKA working out. So
that's not enough endorphins.
What?
That's not enough endorphins for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing was after a couple of years actually at IBM, I realized that I was like missing more and more of my lunch breaks to kind of either pick up food, not even eat. And I realized that it was just causing just like an unhealthy reaction to my body. So I actually made sure I'm taking a 30-minute to an hour lunch break every day now. So that was another small thing, but it made a huge difference for me. And then let me think what other big picture wise. I think for me also, it's knowing how to explain my time to other people has become very helpful. And I don't think I used to do that good enough. So for example, if someone reached out to me, I already have a roles kind of guideline document that shows what I do. And it also shows the breakdown of where my time is going. So for example, if anything ever happens, and I think this is more for corporate management, but if anything ever happens, you can literally just have this document, make sure it's uploaded somewhere on a shared drive, shared URL, whatever, and it wouldn't cause a risk to the program or to IBM. So that's something that I made sure to get very good at. And it's something that I think across the world, things would get a lot easier if people documented their tasks better.
That's a good point. How much control do you have over your schedule? Because, I mean, you can decide to take the half hour to an hour break, and you can actually, on Sundays, you're able to plot out the to-dos along with maybe things that are decided for you.
Yeah, so I think I just been currently in more management positions where I kind of can dictate my schedule, but there are times where there is a manager, someone that's kind of above me dictating all of my time. But my company, IBM, is actually very fluid, where they just want you to get the job done. You have to be on site, of course, whenever the client needs you, but you kind of dictate your time, which I really prefer. It works very well for me when someone's not over my shoulder, kind of looking every minute, what are you doing? That I do not work well under that kind of management. So I get a lot of say in terms of how I schedule my time every day, which I love.
Yeah, that's hugely helpful for a lot of people.
Yes.
And unfortunately not common.
Yes, I agree. And I realize that the more time that I have just authority onto my schedule, the better things I produce, because sometimes I'm not in the mood to do a huge analysis, and I could sit there for 8 hours doing it because maybe like a manager would say, oh, can you do this? But then I realize that if I just go home and go to either coffee, or even sometimes I like to do hookah, I'll just go to a hookah lounge and I'll whip it out in 2 hours and it'll be the best analysis you'll ever see. So it's like, like I've learned when is my body ready and wants to do certain activities as well.
Is it a caffeine or a nicotine day?
Yeah, I usually don't go overboard, but but sometimes like you just want to have like a cool environment and just want to step away from the office a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely helps.
Mm-hmm.
So coffee shops, hookah bars, any unusual places that you like to get work done?
Unusual, I would say those are kind of the most unusual. But if the weather's nice, I am a sun. I worship the sun. So I will go anywhere where I can get a little bit of rays. I was lucky enough to live in DC for 4 years, where both of my apartment buildings had rooftop apartments, where rooftop pool area. So I would go there and work as well. So anywhere there's sun, you can count me in. I'll go get some rays.
Poolside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you, it's like, so Pittsburgh, sun rays, like, what are you doing?
No, I think actually my mother told me today, because I was getting my hair done and she was just there with me. And she goes, yeah, I heard that Pittsburgh has like some of the most overcast days. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't even notice that. But I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. There's something about lake effect coming off of Lake Erie specifically.
Yeah.
It's like a special gray.
Yeah, it is. And it's just kind of, I mean, we're lucky today is like our first sunny day and it's supposed to be raining the next 6. So
yeah. Well, we will enjoy it while we can, right?
Always.
Well, cool. So how long have you been living in Pittsburgh then? And it sounds like so a couple of years you were living in DC, but you were really just traveling a lot and bouncing around for consulting for a time.
Absolutely. So yeah, when I was living in DC, I think I only had 1 year when I was remote and kind of traveling only like once a month or so. So I did get to kind of be in DC a little bit. But in Pittsburgh, I've been here for about, let's say, year and a half now.
Yep.
And I've been living in downtown Pittsburgh for almost a year as well. So I've adored living down there. And everyone's like, oh, how is it down there? I was like, oh, talk to me in college. I would have never thought that I would live in downtown Pittsburgh. It was just not a place to really hang out. And so things are definitely changing in that area. So I decided to have a place there and I adore it.
Yeah, I was there with my brother and a girlfriend last summer. It's awesome. It's awesome down there.
It is. It's really nice. And I think for me, it's also just like there's new companies, new businesses keep coming into the downtown area. So it's just getting a lot more diversified too than it used to be.
That's cool. Yeah, it's good to have that around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So has being back inside of your, I guess, hometown network and college network, has that been a big plus or even minus in your life since coming back?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely awesome because whenever I was living in DC, I was still traveling to the Pittsburgh area like once a month or so to see my family. So it ended up being where I was like, why am I even paying the rent in DC when I'm not there? And so it was definitely hard to make friendships and stuff there. I did have actually some awesome friends that came out of the area, but it was tough. Like when you're like, okay, see you in 3 weeks, and once I got to Pittsburgh, it normalized a lot more. So I think one of the best things was I'm in a relationship now and it's just so much more normal because I get to see them a lot more. And relationships used to be so difficult. And I think also for example, I have like family members who are pregnant, having kids, whatever, and I would never be able to be around them that much. But now I'm able to, and it's a blessing. Like my favorite thing to do is go out for a coffee or a lunch break with my twin sister since she works downtown. So whenever I'm in the city, we absolutely try to link up any way we can.
Well, that's adorable.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's really awesome. I do.
Yeah. But I was going to say, yeah, living away from your hometown, you feel like an expat. It's an unusual amount of drain on your energy that a lot of people don't expect.
Yes, I agree with that. But I think that's the one thing coming back to Pittsburgh. easy to just kind of get comfortable, if that makes sense, where you're kind of just more chilling, more maybe watching Netflix. Where in DC, it was just so lively. Like you didn't have a choice on weekends. Like you had to go out, with people. And so whenever I got to Pittsburgh, I had to know how to make sure I was kept exploring and seeing what else is out there. And that was another reason why I started the Nancy Brew blog.
Yeah. So have you discovered a lot of things about Pittsburgh since you've moved back that you wouldn't have expected when you were growing up or even like living here for college?
Yeah, I mean, so many places. Like I grew up in Pittsburgh and even went to school at Carnegie Mellon, and I still never really explored Lawrenceville ever. I barely explored the Strip, and it's crazy. I was like, I was here for so long. Like, why didn't I do these things? And I think it's like you get comfortable. And I think as we talked about, I was definitely more of an introvert growing up. So I got comfortable in the routines and I didn't feel like I wanted to explore elsewhere. Where now it's like, okay, let's take me out. Let's do something new. And I adore doing that.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're going to be in Pittsburgh for a long time?
For now, yes. Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's definitely a where to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking as somebody who's relocated a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I kind of want to jump back to the shyness thing because it's weird how much that has come up in how I interact with life.
Mm-hmm.
Is against my natural inclination to shyness.
Mm-hmm.
Even now as a musician, songwriting is something I'm getting deeper into. And getting into that it brings up all of these old fears and insecurities and weird emotions that are just tied up in getting out there preemptively. Mm-hmm. But what are some ways on a more regular basis that you think that you're practicing against that?
I would say the biggest thing is opening up about myself with new people. So that was one of the things when I went to work, I was like, let me just do my work and that's it. Where now when I'm trying to go onto a new project team, I talk about myself more and I show my personal side. And that helps me so much because then when those people leave, they remember, oh, Nancy likes to do hip hop dance. Nancy has her brew blog, and so that's one of the things is just being more authentic and talking about your personal life, even in professional circumstances.
Yeah, I just sort of had the thought that, talking about yourself has always kind of been put down. Mm-hmm. People talk about it, but you know what? The people who don't like to speak up wouldn't be saying that.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, so that can't be everybody speaking for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then another thing is like, I would feel there's many times where I would feel like, oh, like maybe I don't fit in because either like, oh, I'm so young in the consultant world and I only have a couple years experience when these people have decades of experience. But I think it's also having that self-confidence, knowing kind of your worth and your value can really help out in terms of feeling like you belong and then finding the linkage between those people who do have decades of experience. That was a big learning curve for me.
Yeah, I can imagine, but connecting with people and understanding people and I guess sharing about yourself, really big things to work with and good things to be better at.
Yes, absolutely. And then also knowing how to present yourself too. And so that takes time to know how you want to present yourself, where you come across. Like there's that good book called like Brag, ! So it's like, how do you talk about yourself, but you're not really bragging either?
Yeah, that's also something that's very difficult for a lot of people. I had a professor for a music business class who very often he'd stop the class right when everybody sat down and he'd say, "This is the time for shameless self-promotion. Who's doing something that you want more people to know about?" Mm-hmm. And it just like a time to practice doing that.
Yeah, that's good. You got to.
Yeah, you have to promote for yourself because nobody else is going to think to do it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially, I don't know, like in terms of you're a musician. So same thing. It's like, how do you put yourself out there? You have to, it's like there will be fans and people who support you, but you need to be kind of your own identity as well.
Yeah. And I went to school. My degree is in accounting.
Oh.
And I looked down on marketing for the longest time, and thinking about presentation for the longest time until I got out into the real world. And I was like, that is a huge weakness of mine. And it doesn't matter how well I can manage everything if I don't have anything coming in to manage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, being forward facing is something that I really wish that more people had thought about. Yeah.
Yes, and so it was interesting because you were like, oh, you did statistics. So I actually ended up doing actuarial science for a couple years. And the whole point of why I switched out of it, nothing against actuarial science. It's a great field, super analytical, things like that. But I needed more people, like more client-facing engagements. So I already knew in college that I have a drive towards that. And so I made sure to push myself even further by going into the consulting realm.
Yeah, it's lucky that you had that insight early on. Yeah. Definitely seems like it's worked out for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we're coming toward the end of the hour, and you said you had a hard cutoff.
Yes.
Yeah. So I probably will sign off here. But if people wanted to get in touch with you, either for your services or to read about cappuccinos, or
yes.
is that the other? How would they go about doing that?
They can absolutely go on my website and just learn more and reach out. So my website is Find You Life Coach. And on there, you'll see you can go to my Instagram. It's Nancy Geronian or the Nancy Brew. And I post very frequently, so you kind of get to know me and then reach out that way as well.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. This was a lot of fun, Nancy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for
Thank you for making the time.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, as promised, here's a sample of what I've been working on music-wise to play us out on. Hope you enjoy, and I will see you guys very soon.